Hey there, everybody. Welcome into Hail Yes, a Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan beat writer for The Freep, coming to you from my hotel in Silver Springs, Maryland. That's about 15 minutes outside of College Park, where Michigan beat Maryland 31-24 on Saturday. I should say survived Maryland 31-24 yesterday. I'm joined, of course, as always, by our Big Ten insider, Reiner Saban, who did not make the trip with me this time. But of course, he was there with me in University Park last week, and we will certainly be together next week for the biggest college football game of the season. And we're going to dedicate the entire B block of the show to that game, of course. But today, we start with Michigan's first tight game of the season, more adversity that set it up, and perhaps an anticlimactic 1,000th win. Reiner, were those your takeaways as well from your vantage? You were sort of like Jim Harbaugh this week, right? Taking it in from a different perspective. Did you learn a ton about yourself and the team and everything as well from this new view?
Not really, but I mean, I think I would disagree with you that it was anticlimactic. I mean, it was actually a pretty fascinating game, and it was a muted response by Michigan after the game.
I guess that, yeah,
considering all that happened, but overall, I thought it was obviously the most interesting game of the year that we've all seen out of this Michigan team.
Oh, by far. And that's why we have so much to talk about, and really anticlimactic in the sense that if you think about 144 years of building up to this moment, right? For it to be the sloppiest game of the year, not in between the two top 10 games, without your head coach, right? It was just, and the muted celebration after. I mean, not that they weren't proud. I mean, Ward Manuel was in there. I mean, they were very proud. There were signs all over College Park, all over SECU Stadium. But it wasn't like had it happened at home, right? Or had Jim Harbaugh, the leader, the historian of Michigan football, been there. So it did feel a little different. And I guess we'll just start. Let's start with that 1,000th win, right? And the crazy week that led up to it, right? Chris Partridge is fired. I mean, I know we're going to do this a little bit backwards just because we're sort of thinking about that in the moment. I mean, Chris Partridge is fired. No Jim Harbaugh. It's quite the lead up to just trying to survive and find a way to get this win.
Yeah, it was just weird how Michigan did an about face basically this week, right before. I mean, they had been so strident. Jim Harbaugh was looking forward to his day in court and due process, and he spoke to the media last Monday, saying as much, and then all of a sudden Thursday, this email comes out saying that they have basically settled the case, and that they've withdrawn their complaint against the Big Ten, and there would be no hearing on Friday. It was going to be a much anticipated hearing in downtown Ann Arbor at the Washtenaw County Courthouse, and it didn't come to pass. And Jim Harbaugh was going to serve out the rest of his 3-game suspension. It was just a stunning kind of set of developments because, again, Michigan seemed like they were really going to go to war with the Big Ten, and here they were basically waving the white flag, and that just set up the situation, as you alluded to, on Friday, where Chris Partridge was fired, and you started to kind of start putting two to two together, wondering if one had something to do with the other, and it was quite a turn of events for what Michigan was doing prior to this.
And then I also think about it really just from the bravado, right, and from the optics standpoint, with how the inflammatory letter that Ward Manuel wrote, and at the time he seemed to mean every word of it, right? And I think Michigan did in that time feel very wronged, but now you just look back at, to that quickly, you use your phrase, to about face and just accept a punishment. I can't ever recall a time in sports where someone was this strongly against something and then this quickly accepted it to try and move on. But again, it did seem as if the Chris Partridge evidence, he is various reports out there are saying that he was tampering with players and different aspects of the investigation, just trying to sort of tell people not to talk too much about the sign stealing when people were asking questions.
It's a bad look because for Michigan and for Jim Harbaugh, because Jim Harbaugh hired Partridge twice. This is the second time he's been with Michigan, so I mean he's a Harbaugh guy through and through, and to have a guy like this, leave the staff suddenly at this point, especially when there's all this speculation, all this controversy, it doesn't help Jim Harbaugh's cause as he tries to, kind of separate himself or present the idea that he, had no knowledge or no connection really to this scheme that was orchestrated by former staffer Connor Stallions.
Yeah, and these reports of Uncle T, right, and this alleged booster Tim Smith, and I mean we'll still vet how true that is, but just should these things pan out, right? The credence of the argument of the argument of lone wolf loses its credence, right, and then it starts the web just starts spreading.
Yeah, and it's also weird because Partridge was very involved in that Empower initiative, the NIL collective, or NIL initiative that was involved. I mean, and then you saw Stallions wearing an Empower shirt on the sideline, and so I mean, you start to wonder about other things there too. I mean, and it's just it's not a great look for Michigan right now with what these developments have. Maybe presented different ideas about just what's going on here, and whether that bears out. It's just the optics of it just not look good right now for Michigan.
Yeah, and as our producer Andrew Burkle points out to us, there also he was close with Jay Harbaugh. Different stories and different aspects. I mean,
right.
Going all the way back to the beginning of this saga, that initial Sports Illustrated report about the manifesto and everything, it was talking about him bragging about his relationship with Jay Harbaugh, and that was back in 2017. So a long time. We didn't want to derail with when it's such a football time. We didn't want to derail with that sort of side subject, but it really did set the tone for, I think, why Michigan may have struggled. I mean, there's a bunch in this game, right? There's a bunch of back layer and levels to reasons why. I mean, no Chris Partridge and the linebackers against Hemby, a very good running back, and they saw using him in the pass game a little bit. Rick Minter, Jesse Minter's father, had to step in that role, and then no Jim Harbaugh. And really the person who has seemed to be most affected, if there is one person without Jim Harbaugh's presence there, it's been J.J. McCarthy. So the reason we started with that is it's not unrelated to the reasons Michigan didn't look its best.
No, you're right, and absolutely, I think J.J. McCarthy has been affected. I mean, he's kind of alluded to that in the past. I think where Jim Harbaugh wasn't there during his previous worst performance, which was against Bowling Green when he threw 3 interceptions. Now you see maybe the effect also rearing its ugly head against Maryland. JJ went 11 of 23 for 141 yards and an interception. Hasn't thrown a touchdown since before the bye week, I think. Is that correct, Tony?
Yep. 4 against Michigan State.
Yeah.
None in 3 games in a row. Or run. No score, no touchdowns at all. None with his legs.
Yeah. And it's taken him completely out of the Heisman conversation. When it looked like he was a possible front runner after the Michigan State game. So it's been a steady decline, but this was the worst performance, and really it couldn't come at a worse time. I mean, you're going into the Ohio State game. You kind of need to be at your best level, and right now he looks pretty shaky.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of it is health. Just walking around pre-game, he did not. He seemed to be favoring one of his legs, and J.J. McCarthy's ability to do things with his legs not only opens up things with his arms, but it opens up the rest of the ground game, right? And maybe Michigan just wanted to make sure they kept him in bubble wrap and nothing happened for Ohio State. But there was only one designed read option yesterday. He ran 2 times in total, but one of those was sack yardage. He was not using his legs to extend plays, and that was a big reason why he was limited. And he seemed to not be getting stronger as the game wore on, right? It was more of just a surviving as the game progressed. He was 5 of his final 12 throws for 44 yards and the pick. The pick to Colston Loveland, just kind of an uncharacteristic. I mean, I guess you could call it uncharacteristic, right? In the sense that it was. I said the pick to Colston Loveland. The pick when he was targeting Colston Loveland over the middle. There we go. Was somewhat uncharacteristic in the sense that he just locked onto him. However, he has had a tendency to just trust his arm and force throws because he thinks he can do it. And there was a throw to AJ Barner that could have been picked. There were a number.
Yeah, I mean, it was that was literally the play right before. I was like,
yes.
Into the end zone. Yeah, I mean, that 2 defenders were right there. I mean, it didn't even look like it had a chance to be completed. And so, I mean, it was a completely reckless decision there. And but it's interesting because Michigan the last couple of weeks, I mean, they ran 46 times against Penn State, only threw it 8 times with JJ. They come out, they're looking to run the football. They ran twice as many times as they threw it in the first half. That was a clear strategy there. It seems like they're working to kind of limit J.J. McCarthy's opportunities, and so I don't think it's helped his confidence somewhat that they've kind of gone away from him. And I don't know why that is, but I mean, maybe it is because of the injury and such, and so they're trying to do that, or they feel like they can take advantage of some of these opponents that have worn down over the course of the year, and they're just looking to pound away at them. But it seems like a clear strategy to kind of, again, go back to the kind of the attack strategy they used most of last year versus the one that they used in the first 8 games this year or so.
Right. Well, Michigan has long been a complementary style of play, right? They talk about complementary football all the time, but Michigan was not winning the time of possession at the same level through 7-8 weeks. It didn't really need to, but it was just scoring kind of quickly at times and in different ways. And so I think Michigan really knew when November comes, you are going to need to play some ball possession and you are going to have to get the run game going. So I think Michigan was smart to try and establish that sense of it. I just don't know if they foresaw that it was going to take J.J. McCarthy out of his element to this extent. Now, this is only 2 games because against Purdue, he still threw. I mean, I think he threw for 330 some yards, right? Like it was the second most in his career. He just did not throw for a touchdown. So that was still a decent game. It was just a lot of handoffs, a lot of running scores. But 25 passing attempts for 200 yards and a touchdown in 2 games at Penn State, at Maryland, when you knew that's when things were going to be getting difficult. It is just not what you wanted to see at this time.
Yeah, no, and especially, again, given what the opponent next week, I mean, he's going against the best defense he's faced all year, arguably with Ohio State. I mean, people can argue that it was Penn State, a couple weeks ago, but Ohio State has been really pretty darn solid across the board. So it's going to be a real challenge for him, and this is not the time to be kind of playing at your worst or maybe having somewhat of a downturn at this point. So I think it's a little bit concerning that this is happening right now.
Yeah, we'll get into some of those problems that Ohio State presents, but I just want to make sure that we are clear. It's not just that JJ has regressed or something, or that he's forgotten how to play football. I mean, there's everything going on outside the program, right? Which can't help a quarterback as he tries to focus, no matter how locked in he says he is. Additionally, we talk about the Roman Wilson injury, right? He left early in the game.
Sure.
Ladarius Henderson, his left tackle, was not out. Miles Hinton comes in for him. He leaves the game as well, right? And so, fortunately for Michigan, and then their coach, offensive line coach and offensive coordinator, is also busy being the head coach. So as he's trying to rotate these guys, he can say that he's as focused as he is. It takes time on task away from the attention to detail you would be giving. Now, he would be calling the plays anyway. So Sharon always has a lot on his plate on game day, but acting as head coach, I can assure you, is just one more thing. And so it's not just that JJ is falling off, and I mean, hey, legends are made next week, right? I mean, he's done what he needed to do. And it's easy. Sharon said, it's easy to pile on when he throws an interception. I mean, it was his first turnover or the first pick since week 3, right? So it will happen. everyone's going to throw an interception. But it was the nature of the interception for me.
True. And I do think the cumulative effect of the pass protection breakdowns is starting to affect JJ McCarthy too, because it's probably going to speed up his operation and, try to, force him to make some throws that maybe he doesn't want to actually unleash at that moment. But there are some serious issues with the pass protection, I think. I mean, even when he's not getting sacked, he's getting hit or affected by the pressure that he's facing. And so I do think that you can't lose sight of the fact that the Ladarius Henderson being ruled out before the game did have an effect on McCarthy's performance this year. I think that's a very good point.
Right. Thank you. And I wonder, Reiner, do you see at all? I mean, of course, there's the caveat that gets added before every sentence, and I'm going to stop adding it because I think it goes without saying. There is so much more going on this year. But are you seeing or feeling any parallels to last year, right? I mean, Michigan was really rolling. Then I guess it was the Illinois game last year. Blake Corum gets hurt. This year, Wilson gets hurt. We don't know how serious the extent of the injury is. But after just feeling like you're so ready for Ohio State, that week before, it's just sort of a big step back and it's an exhale. It's a whoa there. And I mean, things get really, really fast after just sort of cakewalking and Michigan lottie-dying, all of these things. And, it's no big deal, right? Us against everyone, this and that. It's like, now's the time. And so does it feel like it did last year where it's just like, whoa, this just got real really quick? Yeah,
I think it's a fair comparison to make. I think obviously there's a lot more going on, as you alluded to, with the sign stealing, saga, affecting the program. I mean, there's, people are going to read into the effect that, this has possibly had. People are trying to draw conclusions like, what does Michigan look like before this happened, before the allegations came about, to what's happened now since then, and maybe try to decide whether that, their performance has been affected by, the fact that they're not able to, carry out this purported scheme in the same way. And but it's definitely something that you could draw the comparison to last year as well. But yeah, there's so many other reasons why, Michigan could be, having a decline in a little bit of performance these last couple weeks, including the opponents themselves. I mean, I think everybody looked at this stretch as the toughest stretch in Michigan's schedule. It wasn't going to ramp up until November 11th when they played Penn State. And then from there, it'd be a little bit of a grind at the end.
Yeah, and not everybody looks great every week. Go a couple road games in a row, two of the tougher three opponents in your division, and you go and you take care of business and never trail in the second half doing so, right? Yes, it felt close, but that was just like the feeling of a close game. That happens actually in football. People might forget.
Well, and also, and then you look at the fact that, Michigan was outscored in the third quarter for the first time. 14.
The first points they gave up.
Exactly. And so, again, that's something that stands out as an anomaly this season. And so is that the beginning of a trend? I don't know. I mean, it starts to make you wonder, what's going on, but there's so many other factors that could have contributed to all of this.
Yeah. Well, for the record, Maryland scored just 7 in the third quarter, but it was their first 7 or first points Michigan gave up. And so, but we need to briefly, before we move on to Ohio State, we need to talk about all the things that Michigan did right in order to win this game. It was 14.
It was 14. Yeah. 14-6. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they scored a touchdown late in the second touch. Okay, there were 3 touchdowns scored. I was thinking of the touchdown that was scored with a minute and 50 seconds left, or a minute 50 some left in the first half. Well done. I should have had the game script up in front of me. Anyways, we'll leave that in there. I was at the game. I do know how to count. Anyways, we should talk about the things and the reasons why Michigan was able to win this game, because the way we're talking about it, you would have thought they lost. Big plays on defense. Again, Mikey Sainer still 2 interceptions, one over the middle when Maryland was really stealing the momentum in the third quarter, and they were starting to cross midfield. That was a bit, and then that led to Samaj Morgan, Michigan's only touchdown in the second half, which got them that 2-touchdown lead. It was actually 12 points because they missed the 2-point conversion, but it gave them just enough buffer room to sort of hold on. And then, I mean, I'm not going to take all of them, right? But you got Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. You got scoops and scores and a lot of big plays, right? That's the point.
Yeah, I mean, they were saved by the big play because, I mean, again, this is the most vulnerable they looked in a pass defense standpoint. Tagovailoa, like I kind of thought, was going to create some issues because of his mobility and being able to get outside the pocket and do some things. And then also Josh Gaddis, schemed up Michigan. He's very aware of Michigan and their defense. He was there for 2021, of course, when they installed that defense. And so he was familiar with it and probably had some ways to attack it. And so you saw that with, some bubble screens and some, deep shots, and some short passes just to kind of get some rhythm for Tagovailoa. And Michigan was caught flat-footed at times, and they needed those big plays to be able to kind of regain their footing and also kind of keep Maryland at bay.
Yeah, one of those big plays early on. Yeah. Michael Barrett, the fumble strip sack on third down, and then the scoop and score for Derek Moore, who good for Derek Moore, the sophomore, who played his high school ball at St. Francis Academy, like 30 miles north of College Park. I know we talked with him on Tuesday. He said he had a bunch of friends and family who were coming in, so I'm sure he was very happy to celebrate with them after that one. And then. Christian Boyven on the next series with the blocked punt for the safety. Michigan. I think he had a good quote. He said that the special teams had just felt like it was only a matter of time, right? Like they have really felt like they've been just an inch away from breaking some big play. They didn't know if it was on a return, on a block, what have you. But he got free. Blocks the punt in the first quarter, and their punter is Michigan's about to jump on it for another touchdown, and so their punter does what he has to do and just sort of boots it out of the back of the end zone.
Yeah, I think it's most interesting that the 3 turnovers and the biggest plays were made by some of the most veteran players on the team. Sandra Still, 5th-year guy, Michael Barrett, 6th-year guy. This is where experience comes into play. And where, guys like that kind of step up and help out a team like Michigan in a very intense game,
It's literally exactly what Michael Barrett said to Mikey Sanderstill afterwards. He was talking. Yeah, and it was funny. I was like, you weren't there post game, but it's hilarious. Yeah. Michael Barrett was talking about. He's like, dude, like this is on us. He's like we're the ones who've been in games like this. We gotta be the tone setters, and all 3. Turnovers forced. A good point by the captain Mikes. So the Sanders, and then we glossed on it. I don't think people realized how big the sack by Mason Graham on third down was, forced punt in the fourth quarter, and then on the next series, Kenneth Grant on second down to just completely derail any hope of Maryland driving down the field. And the reason they had to keep driving down the field was Tommy Doman. He had a game a few weeks ago where he pinned the opponent, I think it was against Purdue, inside the 12-yard line 4 times. This was his best game. 5 punts, 2 of them more than 50 yards, 2 that pinned Maryland inside the 20. And that included maybe literally the best punt I've ever seen in my entire life. When he just boots it in the fourth quarter. Reiner, did you see where that ball landed? Inside the 1 yard line, between the 1 and the 0. And this oblong football just pops directly up and just continues to spin end over end in place before Caden Colsar downs it in place. They're backed up on the 1. 2 plays later, it's a safety. Ball game. Just every little play that needed to be made. When the offense had nothing, Michigan's defense and special teams made it happen.
And going back to Grant and Graham getting sacks. This is something that Michigan's defense wanted since the offseason. They wanted interior pass rush and defensive linemen contributing those kind of big plays, especially the interior guys. And that's what was a discussion point since the spring practice, and it's interesting to see it come to fruition at this stage of the season when the games are really so crucial and so monumental to everything. And so Jesse Minter is getting what he wants out of that interior pass rush, and it's definitely benefited Michigan because they haven't had as much from the edge players as they had in the previous couple years. So those guys stepping up, has been really important for Michigan's defense this season.
Yeah, it has. Although Jalen Harrell had a sack yesterday, McGregor, I believe, got in on a share of as well. But quick question for you, and then we're gonna hit the break. Rank these 4 interior Michigan defensive linemen for me. Right, like where they were: Mozzie Smith, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Chris Jenkins. Are Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant the top 2?
I think so. I mean, I think they've had
as sophomores.
Yeah, I think they've had a bigger effect on Michigan than the other 2. But I mean, as far as playmaking, now people, especially within the program, seem to contend that Chris Jenkins is getting double teamed, and he's freeing up these other guys and such. But I mean, as far as on the down to down basis, like who do you see kind of making plays and flashing? You see Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant doing that.
Yeah. Yes. That was my answer as well. I wanted to see if you felt the same, and that's nothing against Chris Jenkins, who's one of my favorite young men on the team. And Mike Elston, defensive line coach, said he has been hobbled with a high ankle sprain. He said. So we'll see. We'll see if Chris Jenkins can come up with a big play against Ohio State. Who else is going to come up with a big old play against Ohio State? We'll find out. We'll discuss it next. Don't go anywhere. This is Hail Yes. All right, and we are back. Reiner, I know we said it last year when it was 11-0 against 11-0, top 3 showdown in Columbus in the shoe. We said, how could a college football game in the regular season get bigger than this? We need to stop asking ourselves these types of rhetorical questions, Reiner, because my oh my, I'm not sure how you could get a bigger college football game other than Harbaugh being there as well, or somebody's life on the line. Michigan, Ohio State. Obviously, that's a little bit of hyperbole, but I mean, one of these teams. I don't see this being like last year, Reiner. There's no back door into the college football playoff. This is the college football playoff. Yeah,
it's going to be a monumental showdown. It's going to mean particularly a lot for Ryan Day. I mean, having lost the last 2 games, and Ohio State's not going to really, and their fans are not going to really accept, a third straight loss to Michigan after they had dominated the rivalry for so long. So it's a huge game as far as the Buckeyes. It's obviously a huge game for Michigan because of, all the stuff that's swirling around the program right now. They have something to prove themselves. Yeah, I mean, the stakes couldn't be higher for this game, and it's going to really be appointment viewing for most of America. I mean, I can't imagine Fox is going to be loving the ratings.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, it's just going to do. I mean, as the kids say, do numbers. It will do numbers. Yeah, and I just it's hard to overstate what a loss would mean. Who would be more harmed by a loss, right? I mean, on the one hand, you got to say Ohio State 3 in a row. Ryan Day, I mean, how it would be really tough for him to survive that, even though everything else is going so right. And then I don't know if they'd fire him even if it went wrong. No. But if you are Michigan, right, and you lose, everything about the last 2 years, fair or unfair, will immediately be called into question. Jim Harbaugh's future. Everything. I mean, you talk about this team, right? 20 NFL guys, all these people who came back: Mike Barrett, Mikey Sainristil, Blake Corum, Chris Jenkins, Zach Zinter, Trevor Keegan, on and on and on. Those are just the guys who chose to return for this game, for this run. I mean, if you lose that, I couldn't imagine a more empty, hollow feeling for the most historic class group era, maybe, of Michigan football.
Yeah, I mean, this game could be the bridge to Michigan's future, and especially in the reformed Big Ten, expanded Big Ten with 18 teams, or it could end up being the beginning of a very fraught, kind of scary time for Michigan too. I mean, with a lot of uncertainty. In some ways, they kind of want to delay that as much as possible, and get through this season in the best way possible. Yeah. And if this if this happens right now, I mean, on Saturday, and they suffer a setback, it would be the kind of the beginning of a very, very possibly difficult period for this program.
Right. I was going to be a sarcastic ass and say Reiner bringing the breaking news that Michigan wants to beat Ohio State and wants to keep the season alive. That's why you tune in.
Well,
no, I know. Of course, it's not. It's so much more than what a normal loss to Ohio State would mean. Your point's well taken.
Yeah, sure.
And you talk about problems that could present. Michigan certainly has one problem that it has to contend with on Saturday, and his name is Marvin Harrison Jr. He is the best college football player in America? ? One of five. I mean, him, Brock Bowers. I don't know if you watched Washington again last night. Rome Odunze, man, just a baller. Michael Penix. I mean, there are obviously some elite wide receivers and players, but Marvin Harrison Jr. Will be a top 3 NFL pick this year.
Yeah, I mean, and again, they struggled against Caden Prather on Saturday against Maryland. I mean, Marvin Harrison is a much better player and is going to present some serious issues for the secondary. It'll be interesting to see how they choose to cover him. Obviously, there'll be some level of bracket coverage, I would assume, and such, but that'll open up some other avenues for Ohio State's other playmakers. And so I think it's kind of a pick your poison situation with them. How you defend
Emeka Egbuka, Caden Stover.
Yeah, right. Yes, right. Yeah, it's always tough because again, the one thing Ohio State always has is great receivers and skill weapons, and Brian Hartline, their offensive coordinator, has done a great job recruiting those guys. So it's tough because it's not just Marvin Harrison that you have to worry about, even though he's obviously the key guy.
Yeah, and you talk about how great of a job Brian Hartline, the OC, has done over there. Perhaps one of the candidates for DC of the year on the short list, Jim Knowles, because this Ohio State team, if you haven't watched Ohio State and you kind of look at the numbers like yesterday, right, like 37-3, it's like, oh, it's another shoot 'em out Ohio State team with these receivers and weapons we talk about. No. It's not that. This defense is ferocious, really, really good. They have not given up a touchdown in like 3 weeks. I think the last 2 points they scored against them was like a 53-yard field goal by Minnesota and a 54-yarder by Michigan State. That's it. So Ohio State is doing exactly to those inferior opponents what Michigan did. And Jim Knowles has sort of something to prove after last year. Ohio State had that early 10-0 lead. They're facing 3rd and 8. Crowd is jacked up. He decides to send, looks like he calls cover 0, sends the dogs at McCarthy, who finds Cornelius Johnson on 69, 70-something yard touchdown. That really got Michigan back in it. And so I think you were interested, Reiner, how he adjusts this year.
Yeah, I think he's going to adjust accordingly. They have the best pass defense in the country, so I think it's going to be hard for JJ McCarthy to get Michigan on track, especially given how he's played the last couple of weeks. I think Michigan will try to probably run at them, but I don't know if Ohio State's going to be as susceptible, because I don't know if they're going to go for broke in the same way. Again, some of those cover 0 blitzes and they run blitzes that they called up last year didn't kind of backfired on them, especially if you remember the Donovan Edwards run. I mean, they were caught without a safety there.
Which one?
Yeah, and exactly. And so it's become a problem. It was a problem last year, and I don't think they're going to make the same mistake again. I mean, again, they've probably reviewed that film, 100 to 150 times probably, and it's not going to be the same defensive strategy against Michigan this year. So yeah, Jim Knowles, I think, is going to have made a huge adjustment, and again, he's gotten that defense looking very fearsome at this point. So it's going to be a huge, huge challenge for Michigan.
And I mean, and they seem to be at full health as well, or close to it. JT Tuimoloau. I don't know how to say his name, but I had him on my All-American team. I mean, he's been a beast. Ben Tommy Eichenberg, the linebacker, he was out this last week. Just quick note, but I think I saw Ryan Day say that was really more for precautionary reasons than any. He will be out there against Michigan this week. So Reiner, the key for Michigan, we're going to get way more into the X's and O's in our next segment, but just a quick look ahead. How do you like this matchup for Michigan offensively? Michigan offense, Ohio State defense. Is there a spot Michigan has an edge?
I mean, I think it's probably in the run game. I would lean on that probably. I mean, that's the one area that at least Ohio State's defense has shown some level of susceptibility. I don't know how great they are, like as far as up front, down to down. I think they obviously can get some pressure and such, but yeah, I mean, Michigan's had some issues with pass protection these last couple of games, and I don't know if they want to put J.J. McCarthy in harm's way as much, and so I think they might go back to the strategy that they used the last couple of years, which is run, and then maybe run some play action opportunities against them, and hope that J.J. McCarthy can come through in those opportunities.
I wouldn't mind if I were a Michigan fan also borrowing a little bit of that speed and space that you saw yesterday with some of those quick screen passes to wide receivers, manufacturing a run game on the outside, which also a pass game. I mean, you said it against Penn State, right? Like the best way to neutralize a pass rush is to not pass at all. A screen pass is essentially the same, and so Samaj Morgan looking for a little bit of that from him. On the other side, I mean, Michigan's defense had been shutting down. They've been holding teams to 225, 230 yards. And then Taulia Tagovailoa threw for over 250 himself. How concerned were you, or are you now, about Michigan's outside? Their cornerbacks, frankly. I'll just give you a couple of numbers from this week. It was Josh Wallace, who allowed 2 receptions for 48 yards when he was targeted 4 times. And he also seemed to miss a couple tackles in the open field. I didn't think he had a great game. And also, who surprisingly struggled to me, Will Johnson. He was thrown at 6 times, allowed 4 receptions for 54 yards. That's a season most. And one of those was, just a beautiful 33-yard ball to Prather, who you mentioned earlier, which was called a touchdown initially, was ruled a half a yard short. But on the outside, I thought before yesterday that was a good test. They didn't seem to pass all that well. Pass the test, not pass the ball.
Yeah, and I think it could have been worse if Michigan wasn't able to get some of that pressure that we previously talked about with some of the interior guys and such. Some of that stuff sped up Tagovailoa and probably made him make some risky thing. Obviously, the fumble that Michael Barrett did. I mean, that was a pure example of that, where he was really flushed out and then chased down and lost that fumble early on. So, I mean, it could have been worse, I think, if they didn't get the pressure. And that leads me to my point that they're going to need to bring pressure against Kyle McCord. Under pressure, he's completing only 38% of his passes this year, throwing 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. When he's not when he's kept clean, 72%, 20 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. So it's a huge difference. That's going to be, I think, the key to Michigan's defense. I think the secondary, again, if you're able to, it's the same thing that, teams like even Michigan State has always called rushing cover. it's the key to everything. And that's what, Michigan also talks about is rush and cover. And if they can get the rush, then the coverage is much better overall. Because, again, the choices that Kyle McCord is going to have are much more limited. When he has to throw to one side of the field, or he's forced into, or is leveraged into throwing the ball somewhere, that benefits Michigan. So it's going to be all about generating pressure on Kyle McCord.
Yeah, and in the same way they had to do it this week, it's not needing to bring extra people to do so, right? Because when he's blitzed, he's still pretty decent. He's had 10 touchdowns, 2 picks, completing 55% of passes when blitzed. So it's when there's pressure with 4 and there's nowhere to go, that's when. So I think you hit the nail on the head. And somehow we've yet to talk about Ohio State's running backs, Travion Henderson, of course, Chip Trainum, who is sort of more of a fullback, but last year he was sort of it was like who is this? And he kind of had sort of a little bit of a coming out against Michigan, at least for me. And so Michigan will need to continue to bottle the run game. I thought they were good, not great against Maryland, but they need to be generating, Reiner, more negative plays in the run game. So a lot of those negative plays are coming in the pass game. And when it is a negative play in the run game, you can, are we allowed to say, I think we're allowed to say ass. You can bet your ass it's Kenneth Grant who's there.
True. And, again, Michael Barrett missed a tackle, I think, early on that led to, first down too. And so, the tackling is going to be extremely important. Obviously, tackling in space is going to be very important against this kind of Ohio State attack. It always is. And so that's going to also be a huge factor in this game, I think, is like which team can actually tackle better. And same goes for Ohio State. And so, that's really going to probably swing, or make the difference in this game, I should say.
Yeah. When a game is of this magnitude and appears to be this tight on paper, in rivalry, in any way you cut it, there are so many different things you could say. Like it comes down to everything, right? Like third down is going to be critical. Turning the ball over is going to be critical. Time of possession,
penalties,
value, penalties, right? Like it's going to be, it's the little things, right? And this is why coach speak exists, because there are so many little things, you can't list them all. It just becomes making sure you're on your P's and Q's across the board. And I wrote a column very quickly before we wrap this up this morning about, it was just a little ironic to me. All year, Michigan, right, Reiner has touted its depth, its coaches, how Harbaugh talked about how 4 are going to be D1 coaches next year, and its players, how 20 are going to be drafted. Well, now the coaching staff is taking a hit, right? Harbaugh's not there. Partridge isn't there. And Michigan has had remarkable health on the field all season long. Now, who knows if a couple of the transfer tackles are going to be there? Who knows if Roman Wilson is going to be available? J.J. McCarthy has been slowed by this foot. And so that depth that they talked about all year, now's when you need to see it. Mikey Sainristil was a very good player last year. He became a, quote, Michigan legend when he batted that ball away against Ohio State, right? This is the game where legends are made. Cornelius Johnson changed his legacy. Donovan Edwards, the reason his expectation is what it was is because of what he did last year. Somebody is going to change their legacy for better or worse Saturday. You want to plant your flag on who that is?
I don't. But obviously, I think, again, you did allude to, even Colston Loveland, that's when we really, first kind of were like, wow, this guy's going to be a huge difference maker. And so you're right. This game does make players, and, sometimes maybe even can break players, too. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens Saturday. It's, again, it couldn't be a bigger matchup, given what it can mean for the future of both programs. Again, Ryan Day's in a scary position where, he's entering John Cooper territory if he loses this game, and that's not good. And then
that's not the name you want to be in the same sentence with in Columbus.
Yeah, and then the other hand, you have Michigan, which needs to win this game because the alternative is much, much worse. and what it can mean for the future down the line, given all that is rolling around the program, and what it could mean for the Wolverines, not only in the coming year, but even in years down the road, as far as that, getting their footing in this new expanded Big Ten.
It's hard to overstate the magnitude of the game. Michigan we've long said this looked like Michigan's best shot, and now the time is here for Michigan to take that shot. All year long we did our best not to complain, but we begrudgingly made our way through all those games. Fans too, right? But we wanted to talk about football. Fans wanted to hear about football, but this year did not allow us to do that, right? There was a lot that got to this point. I, for one, I'm just excited that we will get to have a front row seat to what's going to be a day that will be talked about decades down the line. All right, everybody, thank you so much for listening and for reading, as always, which we recommend you do on freep.com. And as always, thanks to everybody else who makes this possible. Editor-in-Chief Nicole Avery-Nichols, Executive Editor Anjanette Delgado, Sports Editor Kirkland Crawford, Audio Engineer Robin Chan, and Sports Editor and our show's producer Andrew Burkle, who thought he was on vacation in California. No. He woke up at 6 a.m. to help us record this. So thanks to the man, the myth, the legend there as well. All right, everybody, be safe. Enjoy your week. We'll talk to you soon. This is Hail Yes.